name is Daniel Mercer, and for the past 7 years I have worked as a fire lookout in the vast and remote forests of the American West. I do not expect most people to understand what that job really means beyond the surface description, so let me begin carefully. A fire lookout is someone who lives for long stretches of time in an isolated tower, usually perched on a ridge or mountaintop, with the purpose of watching the wilderness for smoke. My tower is a squat cabin balanced on steel legs, bolted into stone, with a catwalk circling its glass-walled room. The job sounds simple. Scan the tree line, note suspicious plumes, call in coordinates, and wait for the fire crews to respond. But the reality of spending months alone in a place untouched by civilization is far stranger than the description suggests. I am 36 years old, unmarried, and the kind of man who, when asked why he chooses to work in solitude, gives the kind of smile that does not reach his eyes. I tell people it is for the beauty, the fresh air, the sense of doing something useful for both the forest and the people who live near its borders. All of those answers are true, in part, but the full truth is more complicated. I came to this job after years of drifting. I had worked construction, bartending, seasonal park work, and a brief stint with the Forest Service. My uncle had been a lookout in Montana when I was a boy, and he used to tell me stories. Long nights when lightning storms raked the ridges, when the towers shook in the wind, and when sometimes he swore he heard voices calling from canyons that had no trails. His stories lingered in me, and when I saw a posting for a seasonal lookout position years later, I applied almost without thinking. The forest I watch now is a sprawl of ridges, valleys, rivers, and endless pine stretching so far that some maps still leave parts of it blank. My tower is called Ashwood Peak, a name that feels like it belongs in a ghost story. Getting there takes nearly 2 hours by truck from the ranger station, followed by a final climb up a narrow dirt track that no one in their right mind would drive without four-wheel drive. Once at the tower, the nearest person is likely a day's hike away. Helicopters sometimes thrum overhead if there is a fire elsewhere, but otherwise it is silence, wind, and the lonely voices of birds. I begin my shifts in late May, when the spring rains ease and the risk of lightning sparked fires increases. I do not leave until mid-September, unless smoke drives me out earlier. Supplies are brought every 3 weeks by mule train. Barrels of water, boxes of canned food, batteries, and bundles of letters or newsprint, if I am lucky. There is radio contact with the ranger district, but the signal is fickle, bouncing oddly through the mountains. Sometimes my voice goes out clear, other times it is garbled or hollow, as if someone else were trying to speak through me. I have learned not to think too much about those distortions. When you live alone at altitude, the forest is no longer scenery. It breathes. The trees crack like bones in the night. Owls and coyotes cry in ways that sound uncomfortably human, and the wind itself presses at the windows with fingers you cannot see. At first, the strangeness of the place can be explained away. Your brain adjusts poorly to the solitude. You wake at odd hours. You misinterpret sounds. But as the weeks accumulate, a certain clarity arrives, the realization that the forest does not belong to you, never has, and that you are tolerated there only because something older permits it. My first season at Ashwood Peak, I wrote these thoughts in my journal in an effort to discipline myself. The forest watches back. I wrote on the 7th night. Every shadow has eyes if you stare long enough. At the time, I dismissed the words as the melodramatic product of isolation. Now, years later, I no longer dismiss them. The summer that changed everything began with a dry lightning storm in late June. I remember the way the clouds rose like mountains themselves, bruised purple and green, crackling with energy. Forks of lightning stabbed into the ridges to the south, Setting 2 small fires, I logged on my Osborne Firefinder, a rotating metal map table that allows me to calculate precise bearings. The fires were dispatched. I went to bed proud of my vigilance. The following morning, I rose with the first pale light and made coffee on the propane stove. My binoculars swept the horizon. No smoke. No sign of the previous night's chaos. But when I turned my gaze north, I froze. There was a column of pale gray rising from a valley that had no name. The smoke was thin, almost delicate, not the furious plume of a lightning strike. I dialed the ranger district, gave them the coordinates, and waited for confirmation. After a long silence, the dispatcher replied in a confused tone. "Ashwood, are you sure about that location? That valley's not on our coverage." I repeated the coordinates. I knew what I had seen. The dispatcher told me they would send a plane to verify, then signed off. The plane never reported smoke. By afternoon, the column had vanished. That night, I did not sleep well. Each time I closed my eyes, I dreamed of walking down into that valley, though I had never set foot there. In the dream, the trees bent toward me as if straining to whisper. Their trunks were carved with lines I could not read. When I woke, sweat soaked my shirt despite the chill. Days passed without incident. Then, on July 3rd, while sweeping the western ridges, I saw movement. A glint of metal, perhaps binoculars, far too distant for detail. The thing was, no other tower exists on that ridge, and no trail leads there. I kept watching, certain I had mistaken a reflection from rock or water. But at sunset, when the horizon burned orange, I saw the same glint again, and this time it vanished as if deliberately lowered out of sight. The ranger district brushed off my report. "Could be hikers," they said. "Could be a survey team." Don't overthink it. I wanted to believe them, but a survey team would have required permits, and hikers would have needed days to reach such an inaccessible slope. I logged the sighting anyway, underlining the date in my journal. Isolation does strange things to your sense of time. July stretched long and heavy, with few fires, fewer radio calls, and the steady rhythm of sunrise and sunset. I learned to count the days by the dwindling of my canned goods. Still, my thoughts returned again, and again to that smoke column in the nameless valley, and to the glint on the opposite ridge. One night, near the end of July, I stepped onto the catwalk for air. The moon was fat and white, the forest glowing with silver light, and there, to the north, I saw a lantern. Not a reflection, not lightning, but a steady swing of light moving between the trees. My breath caught. The light rose, fell, vanished, reappeared higher up as if climbing. I tried the radio. Static. I tried again. Nothing. The lantern continued its slow ascent until, impossibly, it reached a height level with my own tower across the gulf of Black Valley. Then it went out, leaving me staring at blankness. The next morning, I tried to convince myself I had dreamed it. But when I stepped outside, the air smelled faintly of ash. No fires had been reported. I will not lie, I thought of quitting then. I imagined calling for a helicopter pickup, telling the rangers I was ill, that I needed out. But pride and a strange sense of duty anchored me. If something was wrong in the forest, then someone had to keep watching, even if no one believed me. By August, the forest felt different, quieter. The birdsong that usually filled the mornings thinned to silence. Squirrels no longer darted along the branches near the tower. At night, I heard sounds I had no names for. Not wolves, not coyotes, not bear. Something else. Low, pulsing noises that seemed to come from the ground itself. It was on August 12th when I finally saw it. Not the glint. Not the lantern, but a figure. I had woken early, before dawn, restless. My binoculars swept the southern slope automatically. And there, halfway down the ridge, stood a person. Too far to see features, but unmistakably human in shape. They were facing the tower, just standing. I kept the binoculars trained on them for several minutes. They never moved. Then the fog rolled through the valley, and when it cleared, they were gone. I radioed the sighting in. The dispatcher hesitated, then asked, "Are you certain?" Her voice carried the same disbelief I had come to expect. "Yes," I told her. I was certain. That night, I dreamed again of the nameless valley. This time, I stood at its center. The smoke was rising, and the trees whispered. From the ash, shapes began to step forward. Human shapes, but wrong, as if their limbs bent at the wrong angles. Their eyes glowed like coal. I woke screaming, clutching my lantern as though it were a shield. The journal entry from that morning is smeared, as if my hand shook while writing. I wrote only 3 words: "They are here." I wish I could tell you that was the end of it, that I left, that I never returned. But the truth is harder. The forest held me, as it always does. And in the weeks that followed, what I witnessed would change not only my understanding of the woods, but of what it means to be human at all. The days after that dream blurred into a rhythm of unease. Every sound was amplified. Every shadow on the forest floor drew my attention. I forced myself to log each sunrise, each sweep of my Osborne firefinder, each call to the ranger district, as if routine could anchor me. But routine is fragile out here. The forest knows when you are rattled. It presses its weight against your mind until cracks form. On August 15th, the mule train arrived with my next round of supplies. 2 packers, men from the nearest town, trudged up the final switchbacks to the tower with the mules snorting and stamping behind them. Their presence was a relief at first. Human voices, casual curses at stubborn animals, laughter at the state of my beard. Those things reminded me I wasn't entirely cut off. But when I tried to describe what I had seen, their expressions hardened. The older packer, a man named Russ, spat into the dirt and muttered, "You don't go talking about that valley." I asked him what he meant, and he shook his head. "Some places ain't ours. Leave it be." His partner, younger and clearly unnerved, hurried the mules back down the trail before I could press further. Russ's words repeated in my mind all afternoon. "Some places ain't ours. Leave it be." That night, I couldn't shake the sense that the forest itself had overheard the conversation and was waiting for my response. On the 16th, the wind shifted. From my tower, I could smell smoke again, faint but distinct. I scanned every direction, tracing ridges, valleys, meadows, but saw no plume. By mid-afternoon, the smell was stronger, acrid, mixed with something else, something sweet and rotten. I stepped outside onto the catwalk, leaning out to peer directly down the slopes beneath the tower. That was when I saw the circle. First, I thought it was a clearing I had somehow never noticed. But no, the circle was too precise. A ring of charred earth in the meadow below, wide as a small pond. Black smooth without a single blade of grass. And in the center, standing utterly still, was the figure. It was the same shape I had seen on the ridge days before, now closer, though still too far to see its face. Its posture was wrong, shoulders lifted, arms hanging too low. I brought up my binoculars, and my stomach lurched. The figure was tall, taller than any man. Its limbs elongated like saplings. Its skin, or what I thought was skin, was pale, almost gray, and its head tilted at an angle no neck should allow. I blinked. The circle was empty. The smell of smoke thickened until I gagged. I stumbled back inside, slammed the door, and called on the radio. Static. A voice tried to break through. My dispatcher, I think. But every word came warped, echoed, like 2 people speaking at once. I caught only fragments. "Don't valley leave." Then nothing. I kept my lantern lit all night. Its glow threw small, fragile walls of light against the windows. Each time I glanced out, I thought I saw something at the edge of vision. A pale hand against bark. A pair of eyes reflecting like coals. But when I looked directly, the forest was empty. By morning, the circle was gone. Grass lay unburnt. No trace of smoke. I started doubting myself then in earnest. Maybe I had fallen asleep on the catwalk. Maybe I had dreamed it all. But my journal told a different story. My handwriting was frantic, uneven, scrawled at 2 in the morning. Do not go down. They are waiting. On the 20th, clouds gathered heavy and low, promising rain. I welcomed the thought. Rain might break the spell, might wash away the strangeness that had clung to me since June. The storm rolled in after sunset. Lightning stitched across the sky. Thunder rattled the tower until my dishes clinked and rattled. I gripped the railing of the catwalk and watched sheets of water turn the forest into a restless sea. In a flash of lightning, I saw movement below. Not one figure this time, but many. They were gathered at the base of the tower. Tall, wrong-shaped silhouettes craning their heads upward, their eyes glowing in the storm's light. Their mouths moved, but the thunder drowned whatever sound they made. My heart slammed in my chest. I staggered back, slammed the trapdoor shut, and barred it with the iron latch. For hours I crouched inside while the storm raged, certain that at any moment the trapdoor would rattle with hands forcing their way in. But it never came. When dawn broke, I opened the hatch cautiously, lantern in hand. The ground below was soaked, mud churned where water had poured downhill. No footprints. No sign that anything had stood there all night. I didn't log the sighting. I couldn't bring myself to hear the dispatcher's disbelief again. August 24th, I woke to a tapping. Not rain, not branches. A deliberate knock against the glass of the tower. The sun was barely rising, gray light filling the room. I turned slowly toward the sound. On the north-facing window, a single handprint was pressed against the glass. Large, elongated fingers. Ash smeared across the pane. I froze. The handprint lingered even as the light grew stronger. I stepped closer, trembling. Outside, nothing moved. No ladder, no rope. No sign of how anyone could have climbed to my window. The tower walls are smooth steel, impossible to scale. By midday, the handprint faded, as if it had sunk into the glass itself. I ate little that day. My appetite was gone, replaced by the sense that the forest was no longer just watching me. It was speaking, marking me, claiming me. That night, my dreams returned with brutal clarity. I walked again in the nameless valley. The circle burned beneath my feet, and the elongated figures ringed me. This time, one step forward. Its mouth opened, and in a voice like wind funneled through a cave, it said my name. Not once, over and over. Daniel, Daniel, Daniel. I woke gasping. The name still echoing in the tower, though my lips were sealed. Sleep became impossible after that. I forced myself to stay awake for 3 nights in a row, surviving on bitter coffee and jerky. My eyes burned, my hands shook, but I was too afraid to close them. Each time I blinked too long, I saw their shapes waiting. On the morning of the 28th, I found a folded scrap of paper slipped under the tower door. My breath caught. I never leave the tower locked, because no one should be out here, but the idea that someone, or something, had crept close enough to deliver a note nearly broke me. The paper was water-stained, edges curling. In cramped handwriting it read, "Do not watch too long. They will see you back." I burned the note in my stove. The smell was not of paper but of pine resin and rot. When I radioed the district that day, my voice cracked. I begged for extraction. I told them I was sick, losing sleep, not fit to continue. The reply came after a long silence. Copy, Daniel. We'll schedule a pickup in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. 2 weeks of waiting while the forest pressed closer every night. I nearly smashed the radio in despair. But then, through the static, another voice whispered. Faint, distant, but clear. 2 weeks is too late. I dropped the receiver. My skin crawled. That voice had not been the dispatcher's. It had been mine. From that day on, I stopped logging. The official record could not hold what was happening. My journal became the only place I dared write, and even then I was cautious, as if words themselves might draw them closer. I wrote, "The forest is awake. The valley breathes." I should not have looked. September loomed. My final month. I told myself I could endure it, that the rangers would come, that I would never set foot in this tower again. But on September 1st, at dawn, the smoke returned. Thicker this time, undeniable, pouring from the nameless valley. I watched as it rose in a steady column, twisting alive. Inside the smoke, shapes moved, elongated limbs bending, shifting. I staggered back, heart pounding. The radio was dead, only static. The column stretched higher and higher until it seemed to brush the clouds. And from the valley, carried on a wind that should not have reached me, came a chorus of voices, all whispering, all chanting the same thing. My name. The smoke rose for hours, thickening until the horizon blurred. I could taste it on my tongue, bitter and metallic. And every breath felt wrong, like inhaling a memory I should not have. By noon, the entire northern valley was obscured, a gray ocean lapping at the ridges. The column no longer looked natural. It writhed, folded, and separated like something alive, as if hundreds of limbs were pushing through from the other side of a veil. I forced myself to write coordinates on a slip of paper, though my hands trembled so badly the pencil dug gouges into the page. I called on the radio again and again, cycling channels, begging for someone to answer. Static swallowed every word. That afternoon the forest went silent. Not quiet, silent. No wind, no creak of pines, no bird call. I stepped outside onto the catwalk, desperate for proof I wasn't alone in the world. What I saw nearly unstrung me. The valley below was empty of smoke, empty of trees, empty of everything. It was as though the land had been scraped bare, an immense crater stretching miles wide, where only that morning a dense forest had stood. The earth looked raw, torn open, and at the center rose something like a pillar, black and glistening, taller than my tower. Its surface shifted, crawling with pale handprints that pressed out from the inside. I stumbled back indoors, slammed the door, and dragged my cot against it, though I knew a lock meant nothing against what I'd seen. My chest heaved, eyes watering, lungs aching for air. The image of that pillar pulsed behind my eyelids each time I blinked. Night fell without stars. The sky was a low ceiling of ash, and in the dark I heard footsteps on the catwalk. Slow, deliberate. Too heavy for raccoons, too calm for deer. They circled once, twice. I pressed myself against the wall, clutching the lantern. The steps stopped by the door. Then came a sound I can't forget, knuckles dragging across the wood. Long nails scraping as if testing its strength. After a long silence, 3 knocks rang out. I whispered into the dark, "Who's there?" The answer came in my own voice. "Daniel." I nearly dropped the lantern. The door rattled as though something pressed against it, then stopped. Silence stretched on. I stayed awake until dawn, my mind slipping into fragments. When light returned, the world looked ordinary again. Trees still filled the valley, green and unscarred. No crater, no pillar, but pressed into the catwalk railing was an indentation, 5 long grooves where something had gripped the steel hard enough to bend it. I didn't eat for 2 days after that. I couldn't. My stomach clenched at the thought of food. My body felt like a borrowed shell, heavy and ill-fitting. My reflection in the glass startled me, hollow cheeks, eyes ringed black. I thought of Russ's warning, how he'd spat into the dirt, telling me not to talk about that valley. Had he known? Had everyone known but me? September 5th brought a cruel kind of reprieve. Clouds cleared, the sun burned bright, and for a few hours I almost believed I'd imagined everything. I forced myself to sweep the ridges, to note smoke, to record bearings. And that's when I saw movement again on the western slope. A figure stood just below the tree line. It was closer this time, close enough that I could see its limbs flex and bend unnaturally, like joints added where none should exist. Its face was a blank plane, but in the sunlight a shadow crawled across it, shaping itself into an echo of my own features. My eyes, my mouth, my expression of terror mirrored back at me. I dropped the binoculars. When I raised them again, the slope was empty. That night the dream returned, clearer than ever. I walked through the circle in the nameless valley. The ground pulsed under my feet like flesh. The elongated figure stepped back, and the black pillar loomed ahead. From its surface, hands pressed outward, thousands of them, pale and clawing. A seam split open, and from it emerged something shaped like a man but wrong in every proportion. Its face was mine. I woke screaming, clutching my throat. The air stank of smoke again. My journal that morning reads, "They are teaching me their shape." September 8th. The radio crackled alive for the first time in weeks. A voice cut through, sharp, official. "Ashwood Peak, this is District. We're sending a chopper for extraction tomorrow morning. Repeat, tomorrow morning. Be ready at first light." Relief flooded me so fast I nearly wept. Tomorrow. Just one more night. I packed my things at once, stuffing my journal deep in my bag, as if hiding it could erase what I had recorded. The sun fell, and I lit my lantern one last time. I whispered to myself, just make it until morning. But the forest did not intend to let me go so easily. Around midnight, the smoke returned. Thicker than ever, pouring through the trees like a tide. My tower swayed though the air was still. From the valley, the chorus of voices rose again. Dozens, hundreds, all chanting my name. Louder, more insistent, until the glass vibrated in its frames. Then, impossibly, the smoke began to rise inside the tower. I backed into the corner, lantern lifted. The smoke seeped through the floorboards, curled up from beneath the cot, coiled around my ankles. Shapes formed within it, hands reaching, faces pressing close, mouths opening to speak in my own voice. "Daniel, stay." I bolted for the trapdoor, slammed it open, and climbed onto the catwalk. The forest below was gone, replaced by an ocean of ash stretching to the horizon. My tower stood like an island in the middle of nothing, and in the distance, towering above the ash, the black pillar leaned toward me, its surface crawling with pale figures clawing to escape. I gripped the railing until my knuckles split. "I'm leaving," I said aloud, my voice shaking. "I'm leaving tomorrow." The chorus answered, "No." Smoke surged upward, wrapping around the tower, shaking the walls. The lantern guttered, nearly extinguished. I clutched it to my chest, whispering anything. Prayers I hadn't spoken since childhood, curses, promises. The storm of voices built until it felt like my skull would crack. And then, as suddenly as it began, silence. The smoke vanished. The forest returned. Crickets chirped below as if nothing had happened. I collapsed on the catwalk, trembling, until dawn painted the sky pink. The chopper came at sunrise, blades thundering. I waved frantically, tears streaming. The pilot circled once, then hovered. A man leaned out, signaling me down. I grabbed my bag, sprinted down the tower stairs, and staggered into the clearing. But when I looked up, the chopper was gone. The sky was empty. The sound of blades still throbbed in my ears, but no machine cast a shadow overhead. In its place, smoke drifted slowly down from above, spiraling, forming words in the air. Letters spelled out my name. I fell to my knees. The letters dissolved as quickly as they had formed, breaking apart into tendrils of gray that drifted back toward the trees. My knees dug into the damp soil, my chest heaving like I had run miles. The phantom whir of rotor blades still churned in the air, but I knew now it had never been real. They were mocking me, showing me how easily hope could be manufactured and stolen away in the same instant. I stayed kneeling for a long time, hands clutching the earth, until I realized it was warm. Not the warmth of sun on soil, but the low, feverish heat of something alive beneath the surface. I jerked back, staring at the ground as if it might crack open. The grass trembled slightly in rhythm with my pulse, or maybe with its own. I could not tell. I fled back up the tower, half crawling the steps, and slammed the hatch shut behind me. My bag lay abandoned at the base of the stairs, forgotten. The journal was still inside. I told myself it didn't matter. It was only paper, only words, but some deeper part of me whispered that leaving it there had been a mistake. All that day, I watched the clearing below. Nothing moved. No smoke, no voices, no figures. Just ordinary pines swaying gently, as if nothing had happened. The calm was worse than the chaos. It felt staged, a curtain drawn back over a stage where the actors waited behind the fabric holding their breath. When night fell, the quiet cracked. At first it was whistling, a simple tune, repeating, floating up from the tree line. It wasn't any song I knew, but it carried the shape of human music, the kind of melody you might hum absent-mindedly while working. My stomach clenched at the sound because I knew, absolutely knew, there was no one alive within 20 miles to make it. I gripped the radio, thumbed the button, and whispered, "This is Ashwood Peak. If anyone can hear me, there's something in the forest." Static. Then, faintly, the tune. The same whistle, bleeding through the frequency. I dropped the receiver as if it had burned me. The whistling stopped. What followed was worse laughter. A dozen voices, maybe more, overlapping, echoing off the glass walls. They were close. I turned the lantern higher, its glow spilling across the room. Outside, shapes flickered at the edge of sight, pale figures moving between trees, long arms swaying. They didn't climb the tower. They didn't need to. They only wanted me to see. I kept the lantern lit until dawn, slumped against the wall, eyes bloodshot. When sunlight finally broke through, the forest was ordinary again. Birds called. Squirrels darted across branches. A hawk circled lazily overhead. If not for the grooves in the steel railing, if not for the faded smear of the handprint, still ghosting the window, I might have believed I was insane. But then I remembered the heat of the earth. That was real. On September 10th, I forced myself to check the southern ridges. Part of me hoped to find a fire, any fire. Something tangible that would justify my being here. What I found was worse. A column of smoke rose once more from the nameless valley, but this time it was not gray or white. It was black, oily, thick, and pulsing. Through my binoculars I saw shapes moving within it. Not just limbs or faces, but entire bodies. Suspended, writhing as if drowning in air, their mouths opened in silent screams. I tried to look away. I couldn't. My eyes watered, my vision blurred, but I kept staring until something inside the smoke turned its gaze back. I swear I felt it, a weight pressing against my chest. Eyes finding me, fixing me. My knees buckled, and I dropped the binoculars. The last image burned into my retinas was of a figure climbing up through the smoke, higher and higher, until it seemed level with me. That night, I dreamed of falling, not from the tower, but into the valley itself. Down through smoke that closed like water, into the circle of ash that glowed red. Hands reached up to catch me. Too many hands, pulling me deeper. At the bottom waited the pillar. It split open like a wound, and I fell into its darkness. When I woke, I was standing on the catwalk, lantern clutched so hard the handle cut my palm. I don't remember leaving the bed. The journal entry that morning reads, "They are calling me down." By September 12th, I no longer trusted my own senses. Sometimes I saw the forest as normal, green and familiar. Other times it shimmered, distorted, and beneath the surface I glimpsed another landscape. Ash fields, charred trunks, rivers of smoke. As if two realities overlapped, and my tower stood in both. I stopped trying to eat. My body no longer asked for food. Sleep came in fractured bursts, filled with the same dream of falling, always ending at the pillar. My voice grew hoarse from speaking aloud, reminding myself of who I was. "My name is Daniel Mercer," I would mutter. "I am a fire lookout. I am human. I belong here." The forest disagreed. On September 14th, just before dusk, I saw them climbing, not with ropes or ladders, just climbing, their limbs bent and elongated, hooking into the steel supports of the tower. Dozens of them, pale and faceless, rising in silence. I froze. My lantern sputtered on the table, flame guttering. I scrambled for it, raised it high, and the figures stopped. They clung to the supports, bodies swaying, heads tilted toward the light. For a heartbeat, none moved. Then, as one, they descended, crawling back into the forest, disappearing among the trees. The message was clear. The lantern was the only thing keeping them at bay. I spent the night feeding it fuel, praying the supply would last. Every flicker of the flame felt like the edge of death. By dawn, I had burned nearly all my reserves. The next mule delivery wasn't due for another week. On September 16th, my last can of fuel ran dry. The lantern guttered, sputtered, and went out. Darkness filled the tower. For a long time, nothing happened. The silence was so complete I almost believed I was safe. Then came the tapping at the glass. First one window, then another. Dozens of taps, nails on glass, surrounding me on every side. I pressed my back against the fire finder, shaking. Shadows pressed against the panes. Long hands, distorted faces. Mouths opening and closing. No sound came out, but I understood the words, "Come down." I screamed until my voice broke. When morning came, the glass was clear. No marks. No shadows. My throat felt raw. That afternoon, for the first time in weeks, the radio crackled with a voice that sounded human. "Ashwood, this is District. We're sending a ground crew to relieve you. Hold tight." I gripped the receiver so hard my knuckles whitened. "Please," I begged. "Said them now. Soon," the voice said. Then silence. But the way it had said, "soon," chilled me. Drawn out, elongated, as though spoken by someone who had never used the word before. That night, the forest sang. Not whistling, not laughter. Singing. Hundreds of voices weaving a low, mournful hymn that carried through the trees and into the tower. I pressed my palms to my ears, but the melody seeped through bone, vibrating in my skull. It was beautiful in a way that made me sick, a song that promised belonging, surrender, peace. For the first time, I felt the pull not as fear but as desire. I wanted to go down. I don't know how long I sat listening to that hymn. The melody twisted in ways no human choir could sustain. Too many overlapping tones. Too many voices rising and falling like wind caught between canyon walls. My bones vibrated with it. My teeth ached. Every cell in me felt tuned like a string, pulled taut and waiting to snap. By the time the singing faded, my face was wet with tears I hadn't noticed. They weren't tears of fear. They were relief. The kind you feel when you've been carrying a weight too long and suddenly imagine setting it down. That realization horrified me. I pressed my hands hard against my face, whispering, "I'm Daniel Mercer. I belong here. I am human." The words no longer sounded convincing. September 17th came gray and cold. A mist clung to the trees, wrapping the forest in gauze. I told myself I would stay inside all day, keep the curtains drawn, wait it out. But by noon I found myself standing on the catwalk, staring north toward the nameless valley. The mist thinned in places, and through it I saw movement. Not pale figures this time, but fire. A line of flames advancing slowly through the trees, burning without smoke, without heat. And in front of the fire walked a figure carrying a lantern. The glow swung steadily, hypnotically drawing my eyes. The figure looked like me. I stumbled back inside, heart racing. My reflection in the glass caught me, gaunt, sunken, and behind my own eyes something watched. That night, the dream changed. I did not fall into the valley. Instead, I walked willingly down the ridge. The figures parted to let me pass. The circle of ash welcomed me like home. The black pillar opened, and I stepped inside. When I woke, my feet were black with soot. I scrubbed them raw in the sink until skin peeled, but the stain clung beneath the nails. My journal entry that morning reads, "They're already inside me." September 19th brought a sound unlike any I had heard before. Not singing, not laughter, not whispers. Drums. Deep, slow, reverberating through the soil. Boom, boom. They came from the valley, steady as a heartbeat, shaking the tower's floorboards. I pressed my hands to my ears but felt it in my chest, in my blood. My heart began to sink with it, pounding in time until I thought it would burst. By evening, the drums stopped. My pulse did not. That night, the figures returned to the catwalk. I woke to the sound of nails scratching the windows, dozens of pale faces pressed against the glass. One of them spoke this time. Its mouth moved slowly, impossibly wide, and though no sound reached my ears, I knew the words. Tomorrow. I didn't sleep again. I watched the horizon bleed into dawn, each minute stretching like a thread about to snap. When the sun rose, the forest looked pristine, untouched, as if none of it had happened. But my bag was waiting at the base of the stairs, the one I'd abandoned days ago. It sat neatly propped against the bottom step, and tucked under its strap was my journal, open to the last page I'd written. A new line had been added in a hand not mine. "We are waiting." I staggered back, bile rising in my throat. I left the bag there, too afraid to touch it. The tower no longer felt like refuge. It was a cage, a spotlight, a stage set for an audience of things that never blinked. September 20th. The radio crackled. "Ashwood Peak, this is District. Extraction in 24 hours. Prepare for departure." The words should have lifted me. Instead, dread pooled cold in my stomach. I didn't believe them. Not anymore. I pressed the button and begged for proof. A name, a phrase, anything human. The voice returned after a pause, but it was wrong. Too flat, too careful. "Soon, Daniel. Soon." That night the singing returned, louder, closer. The hymn rose from every direction, layered with voices I recognized. Russ, the packer's partner, the dispatcher, even my uncle's gravelly baritone. Each voice called me by name, urging, pleading, welcoming. I stuffed rags into my ears until they bled, but the sound tunneled inside anyway. My body swayed in rhythm against my will. My legs carried me toward the trapdoor. I fought them, clinging to the firefinder, whispering through clenched teeth, "I am Daniel Mercer. I am human. I belong here." But the words were hollow. I didn't know what they meant anymore. Just before dawn, the singing ceased. My body stilled. Exhaustion dragged me into a shallow, broken sleep. When I opened my eyes, the sun was rising. A helicopter thudded overhead. For one stunned moment, hope flared again. The machine was real this time. I could see its shadow sweeping across the clearing. Could hear the pilot's voice through a loudspeaker. "Ashwood Peak, we're here for you. Come down." I staggered to the trapdoor, heart pounding, eyes watering from relief. But then I noticed something. The helicopter made no wind. The trees didn't sway. My hair didn't lift. The machine hung above, blades turning, but the air was still. I froze on the ladder. The loudspeaker boomed again. "Come down." The words were wrong. The cadence off. Each syllable stretched, like someone learning human speech by mimicry. I climbed back up into the tower and slammed the hatch. The helicopter dissolved into smoke. The valley answered with laughter. September 21st, the tower shook. Not from wind, not from thunder, from footsteps. The ground itself seemed to rise and fall, rhythmic, as if something immense was walking beneath the earth. The forest bent with each impact. Dust rained from the rafters. I pressed my face to the glass and saw treetops bowing outward, a circle widening in the valley, as if some colossal body moved below. The footsteps stopped beneath me. Silence followed. Then, slowly, the ground split. From the wound rose the black pillar, taller than before, blotting out the horizon. Its surface crawled with bodies pressing outward, faces twisted in agony, mouths opening in voiceless cries. The pillar leaned toward me until it seemed to rest its weight against my tower. The steel legs groaned. The floor tilted. My firefinder slid across the room and smashed into the wall. I clung to the table, screaming. The pillar split open, and from within stepped a figure. Not elongated this time, not faceless. A man. He wore my skin, my eyes, my mouth. He looked at me with perfect familiarity. "I am Daniel Mercer," he said. My voice steady and calm. "I belong here." My grip faltered. My mind split. For a moment, I wasn't sure which of us stood inside the tower and which looked up from below. The pillar closed. The figure vanished. The valley was whole again, trees swaying as if in a summer breeze. The tower stilled. I curled into the corner, rocking, whispering to myself, "I am Daniel Mercer. I am Daniel Mercer." The words meant less each time. I don't remember falling asleep, but when I woke, it was night. My lantern was burning, though I hadn't lit it. Outside the windows, dozens of pale faces pressed close, their mouths opening in unison. They whispered one word: "Tomorrow."